or a hamster showing its teeth. It's, in my opinion anyway.
I mean, knew it. They had it in them. It just eventually had to come out. I mean, they had one of the most brutal dictators of all times. I mean, come on, Napoleon.
Napoleon, yeah, but things haven't been the same there since they finished off Napoleon. Right. I mean, because, this is the country that back in World War II, they basically capitulated to the Nazis in 2 weeks. They sent, when the Nazis demanded the Jews of France be sent to the concentration camps, they said, hey, wait, you forgot the kids. True fact. The Nazis only asked for the adults. The French sent the kids along with them. It's like, don't miss any. The French resistance only numbered about, I think, 40 people on its best day. I mean, nowadays, everybody in France was a part of the French resistance, or their grandfathers were. No, there was only about 40 Frenchmen involved in that. Everybody else was wearing swastikas. So, no, I don't know. They don't impress me. It's been 200 years of not being impressed by France for me. I'll need more than this to be convinced that the French have testicles. I really will. But we'll see. I mean, I just like in the business of ghost hunting, which we will probably get around to eventually, I will keep an open mind. Okay? If France starts bombing another country for no good reason, I'll say, okay, that's a little different. All right? They've restored my lack of faith in humanity. Now, the subject at hand was supposed to be Ciametti Jr.
I'm sorry.
And ghost hunting. And I also, now, anyone who listened to Chuckles' Crypt, we did discuss some comics with Mr. Dyer, some paranormal. What we didn't do is get around to your publishing.
My publishing.
Your publishing company.
Yep.
Okay.
What I did was, when my grandfather passed away, we put all his papers and letters and everything, put them in trunks and bureaus and everything, and I started going through them, and I found all original manuscripts, some that he published, some that he didn't, in Weird Tales back in the 20s and 30s. And I also found letters from Lovecraft and letters from Houdini, because he used to work for Houdini too. And I started a small publishing company to promote his work, to put his short stories back out there. So I have.
Okay, so how many short stories were unpublished that were?
Right now there's probably about maybe 30, and right now I have about 18 in 2 different books now. So I still have more stories to publish in future editions.
And all the Lovecraft aficionados out there are salivating. How many letters between your grandfather and Lovecraft?
That I have?
You said you dug up out of the trunk. And
I have
how many letters from Lovecraft?
There's some letters that some other people have. They went on the open market, but I probably have about maybe 8 or 9 ones from Lovecraft to my not just to my grandfather, to my grandmother too, because he used to write to.
Right, he was a friend of the family.
Yeah, he was a friend of the family. He used to come over to the house all the time. They lived in Fox Point in Providence, and Lovecraft lived on the east side.
As a matter of fact, though, one of the and it's one of those wish you were there moments. I believe it was it your mother who told the story of how Lovecraft used to come over and preview his stories?
My aunt.
Your aunt.
My mom's
your aunt,
sister.
Aunt Muriel?
No, my Aunt Ruth. Muriel was my grandmother.
Okay.
And in one of the books that I have, it's called The Gentleman from Angel Street. One of the last stories is she wrote just a little short story about, she called it The Man Who Came at Midnight. And she was probably around 5 or 6 years old, and he came over and he read The Rats in the Walls aloud to my grandparents because he wanted to get some critique on it. And you have to remember, back in the day, they didn't have electric lights.
Right.
This is back when they had the gas lights, so the gas lights were flickering. So she heard that, and she heard it from Lovecraft.
Right.
So his inflections and everything.
Lovecraft sat in a candlelit room.
Yeah.
And read The Rats in the Walls.
Yeah, and my aunt was in the other room trying to sleep, and then she just writes about how she couldn't sleep for like 3 days after that because of that story and because of listening to Lovecraft's. Okay,
I'll tell you, if I earn my way into hell on the first ballot, as I hope to do, one of the prizes I hope to claim down there is time travel. I would love to be, and I won't even have to be a human. I would settle for being the proverbial fly on the wall for that particular night. Now, Lovecraft obviously has gotten a lot of attention due to the, and I think me personally, I think it's well-deserved attention. I think he's, other than Poe, he's one of the finest weird story writers ever born.
Yes, he is, yes.
That doesn't mean that your grandfather shouldn't get a little more attention. Now, not only was he wrote fiction, now, and you were talking about on Chuckles' show, you touched on that he did research for Harry Houdini.
Yes, he was an investigator for Houdini. He used to, like I said on Chuckle's show, Houdini wanted to find someone a seance or a medium that he could talk to his dead mother. But so many people were charlatans, and they just took people's money and faked it all. My grandfathers used to go to the seances and figure out how they did all the different tricks to expose them. And
right.
He would report back to Houdini, and Houdini would come in with the newspapers and make it seem like a grand thing that he figured out on the spot.
Right. Now, the funny thing, though, is that Houdini wasn't above a few, let's say, hoaxes himself.
No, actually, in the beginning of Houdini's career, he used to do that. He used to fake people out, more or less, but then he felt guilty about it. But he also tricked people with his magic tricks and everything. So,
right. That's yeah.
But with his illusions and everything, yes.
Right, and there's also the connection with between the three. Your grandfather, Mr. Eddie, and Houdini and Lovecraft. I mean, it was Lovecraft who the editor of Weird Tales commissioned to write a story.
Imprisoned with the Pharaohs.
Imprisoned with the Pharaohs,
yes.
Featuring Houdini as the main character.
Yes.
Which was it was supposed to be based on a real incident, but Houdini and the editor of Weird Tales finally came clean and said, okay, they told Lovecraft, write whatever you want because, we're just making this up as we go.
Right.
And Lovecraft took them at their word, luckily, and
yes.
he came up with a very impressive, weird story about the adventures of Houdini. Question, did Lovecraft have anything to do, before we go to the music, because we're overdue for that, did Lovecraft have anything to do with the Love Dead, that famous story of Siametti? Because I've heard that he did, and I've heard that he didn't.
But he had what they used to do. My grandfather and Lovecraft, they would write the stories and they would read them to each other and critique them.
Right.
So they would change sentences and say, hey, you know what? Why don't you put this in, put that in? So basically, all Lovecraft did was maybe change a sentence here or there. And I have the original manuscripts with Lovecraft's
corrections.
Yeah, the corrections on it. And, he edited. An editor just give suggestions. And my grandfather did the same to Lovecraft stories too.
Yeah, so the reason I asked that is because let's hold off on that. Let's get back to the music and we'll get back to this subject. It's too interesting to let die right there. All right, let's get back to the music though. Let's go with Bedroom Rehab Corp. How about Basilosaurus here on the Haunted Cabaret on Rhode Island Free Radio.
In the sky, telling all too much. Another burned out flag, another broken crutch. Feeling so counting in my guts. Through these No matter the time, she was playing. Only love was twisted.
All right, that was Bedroom Rehab Corp with Basilosaurus. A name that sounds like what's needed to be done in my bedroom sex life, but no. It was just a random name. This name came about because the band couldn't think of a name that hadn't been taken yet, that hadn't been copyrighted yet, that hadn't been used. So this was a name chosen completely at random by basically just, as the story goes, they just poked at words in a dictionary. And, that's how we ended up with a metal band called Bedroom Rehab Corp, if anybody's wondering. Now, one of the things I've been wondering about, we touched on it before the song, and I said I wanted to get back to it after the break. Now, and I say a lot of Lovecraft scholars, I mean one in particular, his fellow's name is S.T. Joshi.
Yes.
Is it Professor, Doctor, just so I give him due credit?
I don't know.
I know he has some title before his something. He's wrong as often as he's right, so it doesn't matter. But anyway, he is the foremost Lovecraft scholar as far as influence in the field, as far as having his opinions taken seriously. Now, he's pointed out quite rightly that Lovecraft did a lot of revision work. In other words, people sent him stories. He charged so much to revise their story and make it saleable.
Yes.
And people like Hazel Heald, Adolphe de Castro.
Yes.
A long list of authors published in Weird Tales and the other horror magazines that wouldn't have been published except for Lovecraft's revisions of their stories. Mm-hmm. Now, Joshi, the scholar, and that's why I was asking about the Love Dead, because Joshi lumps your grandfather Siameti's stories right in, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he takes four of my grandfather's stories, and Love Dead is included in one of them that has been it's misinformation for all these years.
Right.
And he just doesn't have all his facts right on the story. My grandfather wrote the story from his idea. He discussed it with Lovecraft like they used to discuss all the stories, like The Rats on the Walls. Lovecraft discussed that with my grandfather too. And like I said, they read to each other and they changed different things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Lovecraft is a co-writer in the story. It's just that he helped out. But that's what friends did. That's what friends always do.
Well, yeah, and not only a co-writer, but in the case of like Hazel Heald and Winifred Jackson, I mean, Lovecraft. Basically, what happened is that these would-be authors sent Lovecraft a one or two sentence,
like a
synopsis of I want the story to be about this.
Right. And
Lovecraft sat down and wrote the story.
Yes.
Sent it back to these people.
Yes.
And they put their name on it and published it in Weird Tales. They got the fee for the story. Lovecraft got his revision fee,
right? Yes.
Which was ridiculously low.
Yes.
And like I said, S.T. Joshi, the Lovecraft scholar, lumps Mr. Eddy's work in with these.
Yeah.
Now, did he ever? Now, I've read his book, the biography, H.P. Lovecraft, the biography.
Yes.
Which is a really good piece of work. There's a lot of useful information in there.
Yes.
It's a good job.
Mm-hmm.
But did he ever make use of the documents that you have, the father with minor Lovecraft corrections?
No. I had met him back in the 70s, but I know he had visited my grandmother at the time, but I don't know if he ever did that, if he ever looked at those or anything. But when he writes about the Love Dead, he writes his quotation. I can't really quote word for word, but he writes, "It sounds as if Lovecraft wrote or appears to be written." I mean, he's not basing anything on anything.
Well, he does that with a lot of the revisions.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, he's not basing it on anything. It's just his opinion.
Yeah, which he's full of.
Yeah. But his opinion. I mean, if you say something 3 times, it becomes a truth.
Right.
Which.
Well, I think